Damien ruins horror movies.
Oh, hey, friends. Back again. I guess it is about that time, isn't it? That's probably why I'm wearing these stupid clothes. And now, this is the final episode of December. But not the final week of December. So there will be more movies. No more Christmas movies, though. Bummer. So now I will take time to say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you're into. Because let's face it, it's not, nobody's like celebrating the deities on Christmas. It's all about like family and people you love. That's what it comes down to. So who cares what you call it? It's all about, I'm going to buy presents for people I love because I want them to buy presents for me. That's what it is. It's Presents Day. Anyway, I hope all of you are enjoying it, or about to enjoy it, because this is the day before President's Day. Hey, President's Day goes both ways. You give and you get, right? Right? And my present to you this evening is All Through the House, 2015, written and directed by Todd Nunes or Nunez. I don't know how to pronounce it. Nunes? Anyway, I like this movie. I saw it a couple years ago. And this movie can be found on Tubi. And if you have not already, you should like and subscribe, because I'm going to be dropping more and more videos unpredictably, because I don't believe in schedules anymore. I work full time, okay? I do what I can. I do my best. So if you want to be up to date, subscribe. Go to the Facebook page and like it. Find me on Twitter. Links should be in the bottom, other than subscribe. Subscribe's easy. You just, you know how to do that, right? The film opens and there's this weird, like, it's almost more like a Halloween decoration than a Christmas decoration. It's this weird Santa with like a creepy face, and these kids are, this is one of those things, I've mentioned this before in movies, where there's something that happens in the very, very beginning, and by the time you get to the end, you've forgotten it. And then the next time you watch it, you're like, oh shit, I totally forgot about that. At least for me, because I totally forgot that this is where the costume came from. It's a creepy costume. It's in the yard, and these kids like throw rocks at it, and they knock the head off, and the head falls off and reveals like, not quite a mannequin head underneath it, but I mean, definitely not human. It proves that it's, it's like a scarecrow in the front yard, and they're like, oh, but it freaks them out, and they run off anyway. Then a barefooted figure comes walking up and picks up the mask, and then puts on the rest of the suit. Next, we go inside a house where there's a kid, and he hears a knock on the door, and it's that creepy Santa. And that Santa looks like bad news. He opens the door, and there's nobody there. And then the mom, well, the adult in the house wakes up. I'm assuming it's the mom. I don't know what the relationship really is. She wakes up and she's like, and she goes downstairs, and the front door is wide open. And so at this point, we're expecting that kid to be dead, but he's sleeping on the couch, just like, oh, and she's like, oh, you little shit, you're supposed to be in your room. It's Christmas tomorrow. So she shuts the door, and then she goes up and takes a shower, which is really weird, because that's what I usually do. If I fall asleep a little early, and then, like, say it's 7, I'm watching a movie, and I fall asleep, and I wake up at like 9:30, I'm like, shit, I gotta work tomorrow. Guess I'll take a shower. Like, nobody does that, but she does. And then we get like this weird kind of jump scare where it's like, and it's her boyfriend, the father of the kid. Because okay, the lady is white and blonde. The kid is black. The boyfriend's black. It's not her kid. I'm trying to be politically correct here. Even though I'm mixed. Why am I fucking having it? Why do I have to act like that? I'm mixed. Don't I have some kind of mixed privilege? So dude's like, hey, can I get in there with you? And she's like, nope. She's like, if you want to get with me, you got to go warm yourself up. So he's like, what? She's like, yeah, you go in the bedroom. I'll be out in a minute. So he's like, okay. And he goes in there and starts warming himself up. We know what that means. He's jingling his own bells. You know what I'm saying? And then Santa comes in and kills her. But he doesn't know this. But then Santa goes into his room. He's got some hedge clippers and kind of cuts his dick off. And I did a video a long time ago. I am ill prepared because I don't remember what number it is. It's called Dick Cutters. I'll put a link at the bottom. Because that ties this killer one dick chopped off so far. In the video I outlined like top 5 dick cutters. People that cut dicks off in movies. It was a sizzler. Nobody really watched it. And it was short too. I don't understand. Next, we meet Rachel. She's on her way to her grandma's house. She's been gone for a while. I don't know why. I'm not sure if they explain it or not. But she meets up with her friends Gia and Sarah. And she goes to grandma's. And it's kind of weird because this normally is the point where you're expecting like 10 years later or 1 year later. Some kind of caption at the bottom. But there isn't one. So you're like, well, what does this have to do with that? Why do we have that opening scene? But on the way into grandma, she sees Mrs. Garrett, who lives pretty much next door. I don't know if she lives right next door. As she's going to her grandma's, it makes sense for her to be next door. But as the movie progresses, like, you're right next door the whole time. There's no way. She talks to Mrs. Garrett. It gets kind of established that Rachel's mom's dead. And Mrs. Garrett's son, her daughter, and Mrs. Garrett's daughter is dead. And they're like, well, nice talk. Merry Christmas. I'm going to go see my grandma. And then she touches base with grandma, heads them off. That's when she actually runs into her friends, Gina and Sarah. And they're like, oh my God, you're back in town. It's been so boring since you left. We hate it here, but we have nowhere to go. And Sarah's friends are like, they're all like giggly to see her and shit. But then they're like, hey, we got a surprise for you. And she's like, oh yeah, what? They're like, look who's here. And it's Cody, her ex. And she's like, hey, how's it going? But in between scenes, the killer Santa figure is running around killing people and chopping off dicks. It's the same night as the opening of the movie. The opening of the movie is showing us that, yeah, somebody got their dick cut off. But now we will randomly, in between Rachel's scenes, we will see the killer is like, who's this person killing? It's like, well, everybody in the neighborhood is running around collecting dicks, or so it seems. Meanwhile, Mrs. Garrett is having dinner alone, but she's not really alone. She's got her mannequin friends. Her house is full of like mannequins dressed up in Christmas costumes. Like Santa's everywhere, girls, boys. Very festive for the inside of a house. It's like, what does your house look like the rest of the time? Where do you keep this stuff when it's not up? Or do you just keep this up year round? And she's having dinner and she's talking. And there's voices that are responding to what she's saying. And it's kind of weird. Earlier when Rachel ran into Mrs. Garrett, she like cut it short saying that she would be back later. She would swing back. Before she went home, she would come and she would help her with some stuff. I don't know what stuff. She's like, oh, I'll come back later. So as a goof to get back at her friend, she's like, I got a surprise for you guys. And she takes them to Mrs. Garrett's with her. Because she's pissed at them. It's like, how dare you spring Cody on me? You know I dumped him. You know it was awkward. I haven't talked to him since I left. Not cool. So they get to Mrs. Garrett's. And it's kind of weird because the other girls are kind of like, what are we doing here? Because they know that Mrs. Garrett's daughter died or disappeared or whatever happened is gone. And it's always been like a weird, like they used to play with that kid. And the three of them have known each other for a long time. So like, what are you bringing us here for? And at that same moment, Mrs. Garrett's like, all right, well, you girls, I cannot remember what she wanted them to do, like why she wanted them in her house. It's like, you guys stay here and do this. But then she's like, I'm going to cut out. I got a date. And they're like, Garrett has a date? Okay. She's been kind of a shut-in for the last all of our lives, and now she has a date. she encourages them to help yourself to the food, and there's eggnog. I made it only the way that I can. And so after she leaves, they look at the tree, and there's a lot of presents under the tree. And they're all addressed to Jamie. Which is weird, because Jamie's like, dead, She's all dead and shit. So why are you buying presents for her? That's weird. You having us over here. Why aren't there any presents for us? Mrs. G, Mrs. Garrett, what gives? But then we cut scene to Santa Killer as he goes for another kill, showing that in this neighborhood, people are dying. And it's only a matter of time till they make it to the house. Which makes it kind of weird where it's like, okay, people are dying. We're setting up a motive for the killer. But so far, this killer, nothing's personal. The killer's just killing because he likes to kill. And he likes chopping dicks off. And he seems to be collecting them. Remind you of anyone you know? Of course not. Who does that? So the girls continue to snoop around Mrs. Garrett's house of mental illness, full of mannequins and decorations. And finally, Sarah's like, you know what? I'm going to need to drink something stronger than what we get. Sarah's like, I'm going to go to the store and get some booze. I think this shopping stop's open for 10 more minutes. They're like, well, you better hurry. It's like, well, no shit. Rachel and Gia hang out, and Gia sees this dress. She's like, I want to try that dress on. Because there's mannequins, and all the mannequins, obviously, they're wearing clothes. She's like, that dress is pretty. I want to wear that dress and take a picture and put it on Facebook. And Rachel's like, okay, go for it. Go for it. And she starts snooping around. She finds an old picture because Mrs. Garrett was a nurse. And in the picture, it's like a class picture where like all the people are standing in rows. And she's like, well, that's my mom there. And then Miss Garrett says she didn't really know my mom, but they went to school together. They were nurses. Which, did you not know what your mom did for a living? Or did she just go to nurse school and then she did something else? Or like, I don't know. But we'll get to it. So Rachel calls her grandma and she's like, hey, I thought Mom didn't know Mrs. Garrett. I thought they didn't know each other very well. I just found a picture of them at nursing school together. What up? And Grandma's like, you know what? I really don't want to talk about this right now. He's like, well, okay. And Rachel kind of gets mad and like hangs up on her. It's like, you never want to talk about it. I don't know. It was weird. It's like, it's even weirder because like she could have just walked over to Grandma's house. She's like calling. And it was like, oh, I can't believe this. I'm so mad. I mean, luckily Rachel hung up because that'd be even weirder. Be like, oh, you hang up on me? Well, I'll call you back. It's like, why don't you just walk over there, dummy? And then we get this weird, because we focus on Grandma because Grandma's like, oh shit, she knows something. But what does Grandma know? I think Grandma starts like going through some stuff. Oh, Grandma does know some stuff that I'm gonna leak that out in a little bit. She goes into the closet and goes and finds this box, and she's like, I knew this day would come. And then we get this weird cat jump scare. But then it's the real killer, and the killer comes and it kills Grandma. Next, Sarah returns back from the store. She bought one bottle of wine. Is that enough? I mean, I guess it's probably late enough that, one bottle of wine between three girls is probably okay. The store's closing and you bought one bottle of wine? There's three of us, bitch. But as she pulls up and she gets out, she looks over and she can kind of see like Killer Santa's leg, but she didn't know there's a Killer Santa. She had no reason to believe that people are getting killed yet, so she's like, oh, all right, bitches, we're going to play some games. And she starts looking and she follows. And then she catches up to the Killer Santa and she's like, oh shit. Because Killer Santa's got the hedge clippers and it's going to kill her with them. And there just happens to be like a garden hoe. I don't know, something with a strong enough wooden pole to where like if you hit somebody with it, it's not going to kill them, but it's not like your average. It's like twice the diameter of like a rake. Because if you hit someone with a rake, it's like, if I'm trying to kill you and you hit me with a rake, I'm going to come at you. Whereas I don't know, but she hits Killer Santa within the noise. He's like, "No, no!" And she hits him like that. She's like, "Oh!" She like hits him again. He's like, "Oh!" It's like the most bitch ass noise I've ever heard the killer make. And then she kind of escapes, but then he eventually catches up to her and he chops off her finger. She's right by the window. Gia's right on the other side of the window, but you know when it's dark outside and it's light inside, where you look out the window and you don't see anything? And it wasn't like she had loud music, she was dancing or anything. She's like right there, but somehow the house is just fucking soundproof. So Sarah gets killed right next to where Gia is, and Gia's like oblivious, just like, oh. And it's like, what are you doing there, Gia, by yourself in the creepy house? You're waiting for Sarah. You're waiting for Rachel. They're both. Why didn't you go with one of them? That part's weird. I'm gonna go to the store with you. I'll go to your grandma's house with you. No, I'm just gonna hang out in this fucking house. Rachel's back inside grandma's house. She doesn't know where grandma is. She doesn't know that grandma's dead. And she finds a shoebox that grandma had pulled out just before dying. And she finds letters inside. And just then, as she's trying to read the letters, the phone rings. It's Cody. Cody, the ex-boyfriend, which I'm not sure why he wasn't with the girls when they came. But anyway, Cody's like, "Hey, what's up? Sorry if that threw you off and blah." And she's like, "Fuck off, Cody. I got bigger fish to fry, Cody." She kind of has a heart to heart with Cody. She's like, "Hey, I just found these letters from my mom, or to my mom. They're from Mr. Garrett, and it turns out my mom was having an affair with Mr. Garrett, Mrs. Garrett's husband." Cody's like, "Oh, well, that's weird." She's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Oh, you're cutting out. And then she loses the connection. But back at Miss Garrett's house, Killer Santa's found his way inside, unbeknownst to Gia. And Killer Santa, after killing Sarah, went out of his way, went to the car, got the bottle of wine, planted it in the house where Gia would find it. So Gia's like, "Well, I don't know where you are, Sarah, but I found the wine, so I guess I'm drinking it alone." Like, that's going to get her to come out. But before she can open it and have a drink, she runs into Killer Santa. And the game of cat and mouse begins. Like, this Killer Santa is like the most bitch-ass villain, like, in a while. Gia kind of fucks her up. But then Killer Santa puts a kibosh on it. Takes her out. Gia gets gotted. Rachel's friends are dead. Rachel has no way of knowing that. And she returns to Mrs. G's house. And she's kind of like, "Hey, Gia, Sarah, Gia, Sarah." And there's no answer. She's like, "All right, oh." And she sees a mug of eggnog, so she takes a sip, which, that's gross. Because, like, I don't know, warm eggnog is gross. Eggnog's one of those weird things where it's like good, but it could be really gross. But I don't know, what did she think she was in a video game where you just, "Oh wow, I found a drink, I'm gonna power up." Go. It's great. You don't just drink or eat shit you find sitting out. That's in a house where you're like, "I don't trust anything in this place. There's evil all around me. Oh, wait a minute. Summer sausage already cut with some cheese on the side? I'll go ahead and try that." So, no, don't eat any of that shit. Cody calls back and he's like, "Hey, I Googled," which I swear this never works. When I Google people, I don't get any information. I'm always like, "Oh, I didn't get their whole background. This guy is a criminal, it turns out." But he's like, "I Googled Mr. G, Mr. Garrett. It turns out he's been in prison for the last 15 years. Dun dun dun. Because the characters in the movie are about 20. Jamie, Mrs. G's daughter, Jamie Garrett disappeared about the time she was 5. And then Mr. G disappeared about the time she was 5. And Rachel's mom disappeared about the time that she was 5. Everything happened about 15 years ago. The story conveys that, but there's moments where you get lost in it. But 15 years ago was when everybody's lives were wrecked. And then she loses connection with Cody again. But she finds Gia's phone. She's like, "That's weird. Gia's never anywhere without her phone." And then she finds a key. And there's a key because there was a lock that her and Gia found earlier. Where, like, I wonder what's in there. if we could find that key, I bet we'd get some answers. And now the key magically appears next to Gia's phone that she's never around. Why she didn't go out of the house and be like, Cody, get your ass down here. I need backup. Instead of like, I'm just going to do it alone. It's like, the alone factor in this movie is so weird. It's like, well, because it's not like, nobody ever says like, we should split up. You guys go over there. But they just inadvertently split up. It's weird. It's kind of cool how it happened. But at the same time, it's like, you would never... If you had a reason to think you were in danger, you would never just like, well, I'm going to take off for a minute. I'll see you guys later. She goes upstairs and she finds like this cage. It's like a timeout cage. And it's got like a mannequin inside it that looks like her. And she's like, what the fuck is this? And then she turns and it's like Mrs. Garrett. It's like, oh. And she's like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? She's like, hi, Mrs. Garrett. She said, you'll never believe this. She's like, what? And it's like, Jamie came home. He's like, Jamie's dead. At this point, Mrs. Garrett like just spills the beans. Like, all right, the jig's up. Here's what's going down. Mrs. Garrett, a long time ago, about 20 years ago, had a baby. And she was expecting a little girl. She knew she was going to have a little girl. She was waiting. She was so happy to have a little girl. But then the little girl came out, and the little girl was the little boy. She took the little boy home, and she snipped it. She snippity-snipped and turned it into a little girl. Dun, dun, dun! Unbeknownst to Mr. Garrett, who didn't find out about it until 5 years later, this is where the story gets like, I understand the story you're trying to tell, but it's weird. It's like, how did Mr. Garrett find out? Mr. Garrett finds out that his daughter was a son all along, so he tried to kill him, which is weird. But then she called the cops, and they took Mr. Garrett away. But then they were also like, what the hell? Y'all cut your kid's dick off. This kid can't stay here. And they took the kid off to like a mental institute or something. Now... Jamie is back. And Mrs. G confesses to Rachel. It's like, yeah, I killed your mom. Because your mom was fucking my husband. So I killed her and I buried her. She's in the backyard. And before Rachel can really react to that, the eggnog kicks in. Perfect timing. Now when Rachel wakes up, Killer Santa is approaching her. A.K.A. Jamie. And he's got his hedge clippers. And he tries to go for her, and she like, I don't know, she's like tied up. It's like, you can't get me. And she closes the closet door with her legs, and she opens it. And now, I don't know if this is supposed to be like a red herring moment. Because even if it was, that would be impossible. Because it happens so fast. This scene's just stupid. Where it's like, she closes, like, oh. And then like a second later, she opens it back up. And Killer Santa, a.k.a. Jamie, is gone. Cody's there. He's like, hey, I'm here to save you. It's like, well... Set up a red herring. There's no way, but this whole scene's impossible. But he unties her. He's gonna free her. See, before he can completely free her, though, like Jamie shows back up. They fight, standoff, and it's funny because like Killer Santa Jamie, has been like getting his ass whooped by women this whole movie, and then he finally squares off with a dude and just started beating Cody's ass. They trade a little bit. For the most part, it's like, man, Jamie did a lot better against this dude than she did against any of those girls. Granted, Cody didn't have a weapon. But then she does like this ankle, I don't know, she fucks his ankle up, and then he, whatever Jamie is, disappears, and he's like, oh! But then Rachel manages to free herself, and she's like, Cody, are you okay? We gotta go. Cody's like, yeah, we need to leave. She's like, no shit, let's go. Rachel kind of like takes Cody somewhere where she can stash him, like in a cupboard, like he's a little baby. Rachel ends up doing a final girl jump out the window, but at least Rachel has opened the window first, so she just like jumps out and lands. So she's not cut up. Might break a normal person's legs, but she keeps running, and then Jamie jumps down after her and chases her for a while. And she's like, oh, it's like, all right, I think I lost Jamie. She circles back and goes back to the house that she just escaped from. It's like, why didn't you go to your grandma's house? I'm going to go back to Mrs. Garrett's. And when she gets inside, Mrs. Garrett is waiting for her, and they go toe to toe. They fight it out. And just as Rachel is about to kill Mrs. Garrett, Killer Santa Jamie shows up and puts a halt to that shit. And puts her in that timeout cage. Then he goes to his mom, Mrs. Garrett, and Mrs. Garrett's like, oh, Jamie, you're back. What did you bring me? And Jamie brings Mrs. Garrett this bag of dicks he's been collecting this whole movie. Because Jamie's not a girl. Jamie doesn't want to be a girl. Jamie's a man who has not had a dick for his whole life. So he's been collecting dicks this whole movie. That's why he's chopping up the dicks. He's not doing that to be an asshole. He's doing it because he wants his own dick. He's like, I got this bag of dicks. And it's just like a bag. It is funny because there's one where he went after a girl and he killed her, expecting like a man to be in the shower and come out next, but it was the girl was a lesbian. So he's like, well, so he kills them both, and he's like, well, he finds the dildo, and he's like, well, how much that was in the bag too? Maybe you can sew that onto me. But Mrs. G is like, all right, good, you got the dicks, cool. We can make you whole again. You go grab my surgical kit. And so Jamie leaves the room. Mrs. G has a little heart-to-heart with Rachel. And she's like, oh, no, I missed a big part. Fuck, rewind. She's like, all right, wow, you got this bag of dicks. Which one of these dicks do you want? Is there one in here that you would like me to sew onto you? And he's like, He's like, I want that one. Because Cody's still, like, tied to the bed in the room. And Cody's like, no, you have a bag of dicks over there. Those are your choices, not mine. Mine's still attached. And Mrs. G's like, all right, well, you go in the other room, get my surgical kit, and we'll make this shit happen. And Jamie's like, all right, I'm going to have Cody's dick. And not in a gay way. And then Mrs. G kind of gives more story to Rachel about how it's like, I'm not giving Jamie a dick. That's not really even possible. He's been missing a dick for 15 years. You can't just sew one on. Jamie didn't know that. Jamie has to die. Finally. And it's like, how do you expect to get away with this? Like, she's like, oh, same way I've always gotten away with it. I killed your mom. I got my husband sent away. I thought Jamie was dead. Now Jamie's back. I'll just say there was a struggle. I fought for my life and I killed him. My husband fucked your mom and gave her a daughter and gave me this son. I always wanted a daughter. But now I finally have a daughter. That's right. You and Jamie are family. You are half brother and half sister. But I don't need Jamie anymore. You're my daughter now. It's like, Then Jamie comes back in the room. I think he's still got his bag of dicks, but he's got this Raggedy Ann doll that they show at the beginning of the movie. And he's like, it's like, this is what Rachel got me a long time ago. Somehow nostalgic after being crazy for 15 years. It's like, I remember you now. You got me this fucking doll. So Mrs. G's like, Jamie, I want to talk to you in private real quick, okay? Let's go out by the tree before she leaves. She takes the hedge clipper. She kills Cody, and Cody's like, oh. And Rachel's like, what the fuck? Then she takes Jamie out by the tree and it's like, hey, I'm so glad you came back. It gives us a heartfelt speech and then ends it with like, she's like, but at the same time, you're just a dickless man. And nobody's got any use for that. And she stabs him in the back. And he's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Because he makes the funniest sounds when he gets hurt. But then instead of like dying, Jamie like gets up. He's like, oh, bitch. And he grabs her and he starts choking her. And she's like, she reaches for the knife. It's like, fell out of his back. She reaches for it. And all of a sudden there's a foot on her wrist. And she looks up And it's Rachel, and Rachel's like, no, bitch. And all of a sudden, it's like Jamie and Rachel are on the same team. Jamie chokes Mrs. G to death. Then he looks at Rachel and she says, little throwback humor, she says, let's bury this bitch in the backyard. And now both their moms can be together. They throw the mask outside. The end. And it's kind of weird. Were they working together all along? They couldn't have been. Could they have? This movie does work as kind of a mystery where it's like, But if you want to find shit out, you wouldn't get all your friends killed and your grandma. It's bad writing. That's what it is. Nevertheless, though, the badass award goes to Rachel. I mean, unless she was in it all along, because that's weird. So, yeah, what? It's a neat twist, but it couldn't work. I think she played along to get away with it. I think she killed Jamie shortly after and went back to where she came from. I don't know what she did. I like the movie. Other than being like a final girl, I have no reason for her to get the badass award. Ha. What did we learn? Survival tales. Don't let your girlfriend handcuff you to a bed. Don't have sex on Christmas Eve. Don't drink pre-poured things that you find in a creepy house. That's all I got tonight. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Whichever you prefer. Hopefully we get out of this goddamn pandemic soon, right? See you next time. See ya!